Hello and welcome to this episode of the Brandsight podcast. My name is Elisa Cooper and I'm here with Matt Serlin. And we are going to talk about the EPDP, which is the expedited policy development process that is currently underway at ICANN to figure out how to deal with this temporary spec and GDPR and its impact to registries, registrars, and everyone who wants to get access to WHOIS records. So Matt, tell us exactly what is going on. I guess I should be the first to congratulate you for being appointed to the EPDP. So congratulations.
Yeah, I don't know if congratulate or condolences is more appropriate, but thank you. Yes, I'm happy to be participating, and we've got a lot of work ahead of us. But I think it's going to be exciting to be a part of, and I'm looking forward to working with the rest of the community members to move this forward.
So maybe, before you dive in, you can explain just a little bit, what is this EPDP and how is it different from what we've had in the past?
Sure. So, I think everyone knows at this point that the ICANN board adopted this temporary specification back in May that dealt with WHOIS relative to GDPR, which went into effect May 25th. So all contracted parties, now registries and registrars, have to abide by the terms of the temporary specification. However, the temporary spec can only be in place for a year. It goes away within a year. And so in parallel now, the community has to develop full policy that will govern WHOIS going forward. And unlike a traditional policy development process, or PDP, which takes anywhere from 2 to 3 years, we don't have that kind of time, right? So that's why the GNSO, which is the generic name supporting organization, the sort of policy making body at ICANN, is using this expedited policy development process. The goal, obviously, to have it done, completed within now 10 months, because we're over 2 months into the full year that we have for the temporary spec.
So who's part of this EPDP working group? Who comprises that group?
Yeah, so it's made up of representatives from all of the ICANN constituencies and stakeholder groups. So my participation in the group is representing the registrar stakeholder group, which obviously as a contracted party has a vested interest in WHOIS policy going forward and what the obligations for registrars are and how they handle data and things like that. So registrars are involved, the registries are obviously involved. And then you've got the non-contracted parties, so the intellectual property constituency, the business constituency. And then one interesting note is that the Government Advisory Committee also has actual members that will be full participants in the policy development process, which is unique because usually the GAC will play an observation and advisory role. But because this is such a high profile topic and of such import to the governments of the world, it's good to see them have an actual place in the working group.
So now it's my understanding that the contracted parties have 6 representatives appointed to this working group. The non-contracted parties have actually 12, and the GAC has 3.
Yep, that's right.
So how does that play out, though, in terms of, voting on whether or not the group agrees on a particular principle or a particular piece of the policy?
Yeah, so the way that the group will reach consensus will be done in such a way that does not disenfranchise any party based on the fact that they have fewer participants. Okay. So it will essentially hold true to the way the GNSO Council votes and the representation there. That's kind of how we'll reach consensus based on the numbers that you just went through in the group.
So in terms of timing, what is it looking like? I mean, when do you have to have sort of a draft report, or what is the expectation?
Yep, so there's really sort of 3 different deliverables that the working group is expected to create. The first one is really just to go through the temporary spec and see if, as written and as implemented, if there are things within the temporary spec that everyone sort of agrees that we can reach consensus on, that we can sort of say, yes, as it's written in the temporary spec, this really should be part of the long-term policy, and we can sort of move those over to the side and say, yep, this set of issues are fine. Everyone reached consensus as they are in the temporary spec. So that's phase one. Then phase two is obviously then to look at what's left that there isn't consensus on, whether that be the data that's collected, or how that data is handled, or what parties get access to that data. So that part of the process, the goal is to have that done ahead of the October ICANN meeting in Barcelona. So that gives us really 3 months at this point of work. And then that'll be an interim report. That'll be obviously put out for public comment. The community will have an opportunity to review, discuss it. Then we'll take those comments back and then provide a final report. And then the third area that we are tasked with is to come up with a deliverable that outlines the process for access and accreditation program to the non-public WHOIS data. And the reason that is the sort of third step is a lot of that upfront work needs to be determined before we can start work on the access to that non-public data.
And that could likely go on for quite some time, because I think the expectation is that this new policy, which will replace the temporary policy, will still have that requirement for those that are looking for non-public WHOIS information to get that in a reasonable period of time or in a reasonable way, so that would still sort of be in place until sort of the access and accreditation could be defined and then implemented.
Yes, that is correct, and that definitely could go past the time of the expiration of the temporary spec.
Right.
And that whole notion, the inclusion of that and how that was worded was one of the probably one of the most contentious items within the drafting of what's called the charter around the EPDP group, because obviously there is a ton of interest by a number of parties in making sure that that is predictable, and that every contracted party is held to the same standard, and that there is reasonable expectation that if I am trying to get access to that data from any contracted party anywhere around the world, that I have the same experience. And right now, I think what we're hearing is that isn't the case. So I'm sensitive to that. I think the concern was if we tried to package that up and do that at the same time as doing all of the actual EPDP work that we have to do on the temporary spec, that there was a real risk that we just would not have enough time to get it done. And, and again, that temporary spec goes away in May of 2019. So that work has to be done.
Right. I think there's a lot of work there just in the first part that it'll be a struggle to get that completed prior to sort of the expiration of the temporary spec.
Yeah, I mean, it's for sure going to test the community, and it's gonna. One of the reasons that I'm excited to participate in this is it'll be a real test to see if the community can really come together, and as with all of these sorts of things, everyone's going to have to compromise a little bit. People are going to have to give. I don't expect any party or stakeholder group to give on everything, nor should they expect to, but definitely there's going to have to be a lot of give and take, and it's going to be interesting to sort of have a front row seat to see it play out.
Well, I'm hopeful. I think those that are involved know that this must happen, and this work must be completed, and then there must be something to replace the temporary spec. Otherwise, I think this really calls into question the validity and really the credibility of ICANN itself.
Yeah, no, for sure. I think we're all acutely aware of the fact that the eyes of the community, the ICANN community, are on the 33 participants of this group. So it's a lot of pressure, a lot of weight that all of us will carry, but I'm hopeful that we'll get it done.
Well, interesting times ahead indeed, and we'll obviously be watching this closely, and you'll be participating, so I'm sure we'll be talking again soon as things start to get moving, and we'll keep our eyes on it.
Yeah, once we're able to come up for air in 3 or 4 months, we'll record another podcast.
Well, thanks everyone for joining us today. As always, we enjoy having you listen to us. If there are any topics you'd like us to cover, please do let us know. We appreciate you listening. Thank you so much.
Thanks, everyone.